when I did eventually join the squadron, which is related to this in a way, I was appalled to find the bods who had been part of the first 10 who were with the squadron and been with it, say, 5-6 weeks before I got back from OTU. They could not only identify sea aircraft, say how many there were, and I couldn't even see the things. Yeah. It's one of the problems they seemed to feel was that we were flying 4s at that stage. One of the things we found that was by looking at the aircraft next to you to keep position, your eyes focused on it. Now when you looked out into space, your eyes had nothing to adjust on. But once they were free of this little lot, what you would tend to do, if you were looking for any length of time at the aircraft next to you, particularly when you were doing a turnabout or doing a 90 right or 90 left, you kept a very close aircraft because all 12 of you were moving around. You tried to find a cloud or something that was far away. You looked at it and got your eyes back into focus for distance, because that's invariably where Jerry was. Yeah. Unless you were plumb unlucky and he was right amongst you, which was so one picked up those tricks of the trade. But the refining period came as when you joined the squadron. That was, as in most training, the basic. It's like learning to drive a motor car. You get your license, you think you're a kingpin. It's only then you start learning to drive. And it's much the same, I feel, as far as... And I always used to fly with my top straps unlocked, except when I took off and landed. Some people I know locked themselves back. I think in the times when we were meeting fighter aircraft, as opposed to much later in the war, where we very seldom came across them, I know 2 people who said they got into their aircraft and they locked and stayed locked until they landed, then unlocked. But once I got off the ground and others got off the ground, you unlocked. The bottom straps kept you tied in. The top straps, you had a plate in your harness and steel braided wire, spring-loaded with, I believe, a knob at the end, so that you moved a little thing which was like a bolt, and you could move and you could look around, which you can't do when you're tied back. You could get forward, and also you could get at certain controls of your aircraft. And so we found that looking round was a very necessary part of the game. And so if we wanted to, we saw something at 6 o'clock, you could see almost behind you, but your squadron formation was such that somebody, the right-hand side was covering the left-hand side was covering the right. The numbers 2 were covering the front blokes, who were the hackers, really. We were basically, the number 2s were there to protect the tails of the, because even if you flew as a 12, 6 in the front rack, 6 in the back, when things eventually got tight and you broke down, you always broke down to 2 aircraft. You tried as far as possible. The number 2 just sat on the number 1's tail about 50 yards behind and kept watch. And if he was in a hacking situation, he sometimes would say, okay, come up beside me and you take a stab at it. But generally speaking, he was the one who did the hacking. You stayed there as protection to him. What happened is that those on the right-hand side, including the hackers, would be covering in front to their wing. The number 2 would be covering the whole area and behind. So the numbers 2 were consistently looking at the last 180 degrees mostly and leaving it to the front blokes. And the right-hand side were looking up, because if the sun was in a certain position, if you were looking up to it, and that's what they did, they tended to come out of the sun. The bods on the one side had a better view up there, even though they were only, say, 200 yards apart. They had a slightly different angle and might just pick up a twinkle which came off the canopy, and they would say bogies up there immediately. It'd be sort of 3 o'clock high, and you'd look to 3 o'clock immediately, and then you'd start going up and you'd hunt around that area. But when you were flying, you spent some time looking at one area, and then you didn't just look around all the time. That's useless. You look at one area, make certain there's nothing there, look at another area. So it was done section-wise.